Good evening. I'm Dan Thomas. I'm the Communications Director and the spokesperson for the President of the UN General Assembly. Thank you for attending this media stakeout following today's informal dialogue of the General Assembly. This stakeout will be followed by another stakeout by the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Mogens Lykketoft, who will reflect on the selection process and the 9 dialogues that he's chaired over the last 3 days. But now please allow me to introduce Dr. Srgjan Kerim, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Macedonia and President of the 62nd session of the UN General Assembly. Dr. Kerim has been nominated by his country, the Republic of Macedonia, as a candidate for the position of the next Secretary General of the United Nations. Sir.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to meet you tonight here in the United Nations. We are on 2 sides, but we are not opposite. I'm one of you running a media company for many, many years. I've not only become familiar with the media business, but also with the mentality of journalists and journalism. So if you want to exhaust me tonight, I'm yours. Go ahead.
Very good. Matthew.
I wanted to ask you 2 questions. One, since you were here, there's been the outbreak of a corruption scandal involving former President of the General Assembly, John Ash, purchase of documents from the Secretariat, events in the GA lobby, and I wanted to know, if you became Secretary General, what you would do to tighten up what seems to be holes in the system, and whether you had any experience with this when you were PGA. And also, finally, your campaign finance? Has FIROM devoted a part of a budget? Are there outside funders to it? Will you disclose, as some others have committed to, who's funding the campaign? Thank you.
I didn't understand who is financing it. Say it again.
Like obviously, not flying here. Is there a budget from your government that nominated you?
You meant my government now, because you said something I didn't understand.
I said that some others had committed to disclose their finances. That's all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. First of all, government decisions in my country are always published in the government bulletin, which means every government decision is public, including the decision when the government decided to ask me to run for the function of Secretary General, and the government has decided to fund it with 60,000 euro. 20,000 euro have been spent in 2015, and the rest of 40,000 will be spent now while the campaign is going on. If there is need for additional resources, the government will decide on that, but so far that's the budget. In addition to that, once I'm in the private sector, and I cannot complain about my financial status, I'm funding it also myself. I can give you concrete examples. How does it function in practice? Our government has a decision for people who travel in Europe to travel only economy class. If I want to upgrade it, I have to pay from my own pocket. Our government has decided all flights which are less than 6 hours are economic class. If I want to upgrade it, I have to fund it. Accommodation is limited. They gave always limits for the hotel expenses for accommodation, and you have to respect them and you have to report to them. Our mission in New York is involved in that. The respective missions or embassies abroad are part of it. That's about the funding. About the scandal with one of my colleagues, former President of the General Assembly, I can tell you that the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, has asked me, as a former President of the General Assembly, to closely cooperate with the task force which is preparing a report on then all that with recommendations from member states, and I did it with a great, I wouldn't say pleasure, it's not a matter of pleasure, but awareness that we are all responsible for what is going on in this organization, and we have to make sure that malpractice by individuals, by groups and others should not overshadow the authority and the reputation of the organization, and it is in the interest of organization to clarify and to have a very clean situation when it comes to these very unfortunate cases. And I can assure you that it will be resolved. As far as I know, the report is ready, and I don't know whether it has been distributed. It's been released already, so I'm part of it for your record, although my name is not there. I insisted on that because I didn't want to be, let's say, published as a name. For me, what counts was the fact that the Secretary General entrusted me to help this task force to get to the result. What counts is the result and not who did it. Please.
Mr. Kerim, Edith Lederer from the Associated Press.
I know, I remember.
How are you?
Edith.
It's nice to see you back here.
I remember all of you, but I don't want to show it in a gesticulative way because we have to be, formal and fulfill first our tasks. After that, we can talk in private. No problem.
I have two questions. How important is it for you that the next Secretary General be from Eastern Europe? And what would your top priorities be if you became Secretary General in the first 100 days?
Thank you, Edith, very much. Let me define it this way. This organization is based on written rules, resolutions, first of all, a charter. It has a charter. It has hundreds of resolutions, conventions, documents of all type, conclusions of all type. But part and parcel of this organization are the so-called unwritten rules. And one of the unwritten rules is rotation. The President of the General Assembly has been elected for 70 years based on the principle of rotation. All the judges as well, all the undersecretaries, everything rotates in the organization. So there is a question, rhetoric question, why would not that be the case with the Secretary General? That's one argument. The second argument is it is about mutual trust. If we start breaching the unwritten rules, not respecting them, that will not narrow the gap which already exists. Let's be frank about it. There are a lot of gaps in this organization and divisions. What we have to do is to narrow the gaps, to cover these divisions, to be more united than we are. And in order to be more united than we are, we have to increase the degree of mutual trust. And in this case, it is to give the chance to the Eastern European group. It is the smallest group in terms of numbers. It has only 23 member states, but they all are founding members of this organization. We have to honor the fact that they all are founding members of this organization. And by the way, and that's the third argument, Eastern Europe was the region in the world which emerged and energized the West-East gap and overbridged it. Nuclear war, the Third World War, was potentially always based in Europe, in the middle, in the heart of Europe. We, the East Europeans, made it impossible. the unification of Germany would have never happened, never ever happened under these circumstances without all the other Eastern Europeans who contributed to overcome this division. We were the ones who have introduced the Organization for European Security and Cooperation, the OSCE, which is a partner of the United Nations. Without our contribution, that organization would have never existed, and without its existence, not only the reunification of Germany would have not happened, but also the detente and the cooperation between East and West. And that's why Eastern Europe has a legitimate right to have not only candidates, but the next term of the Secretary General. The second question, sorry.
What your priorities would be in the first 100
yes,
days?
The first priority is, a man who wants to persuade his neighbors that he's a good neighbor will not ask them to clean their backyards. He will first clean his own backyard. So you have to start with the 38th floor and all the way around this building and all the United Nations offices and people there to start to work in a not only diligent and loyal way, which I never question. There are many, not only decent but able people working in this organization, but you have to improve the organization. All the people, and my humble experience is telling me, I've been in politics, I've been in diplomacy, I've been in business, I've been in academia. To be successful is not only about diligently working, it's about organization. So you have to set up such an organization of work that things will start improving, and that's what we need. We badly need, and the Secretary General must be involved into that all the way up to his head. And that will be the first 100 days, to ask for reports. I want to make sure that I have competent reports on the internal situation, what's going on the gender equality, and to set up a program to implement it. We are talking and talking endlessly about gender equality, and look at the facts. Now we have less women in the Secretariat and all on these upper levels than we used to have. It's on about 20-something%, 22, 24, I don't know exactly, but it's right there. That must be improved, that must be corrected. And therefore, a Deputy Secretary General, a woman. Undersecretaries equally represented. If there are 10 undersecretaries, 5 must be women. Half of the population of the world is women. So we have a reservoir. We should not have doubts about merits. And to confront merits with gender is an artificial discussion. It's just like discussing for discussing. As the French would say, l'art pour l'artisan. And that we don't need. Thank you.
Mr. Kerim, my name is George Baumgarten. I'm a correspondent for Jewish newspapers in North America, as well as for some East African and other publications. What would you do as Secretary General, sir, if elected, to encourage Israelis and Palestinians to recommence negotiations? And what do you think can be done on a related issue with the Human Rights Council, which is made about 75 or 80% of its resolutions condemnatory of Israel, at of course, the expense of not talking about many other vastly greater human rights abusers?
We are all victims of an old-fashioned way of thinking, and mindset. The first thing, if you want to embrace people, if you want to get people together, is chemistry. The best relations are always based on a good chemistry. And there is no good chemistry. There cannot be, because we don't talk to each other, we talk about each other. So Israel has to be integrated into this organization on many levels, by all ways and means, so that it feels like part and parcel of it, and that's something which we have to do. It's a painful process. I know that that's not something which happens overnight, but that's what we have to do. I said that right now in the assembly. Egypt and Israel were arch enemies. They became partners. You know, we have all these three options in diplomacy, and that's very good. The first one, you treat someone as a partner, or as an opponent, or as an enemy. You can't do three at the same time. You can't treat someone as the opponent, as the enemy, as the partner. You have to define that. What we have to define in this case is to make them partners. They are partners. There will be shortage of water. There is desertification. There are global problems which affect directly the Middle East. They will be all victims of that. There is no paradise in the Middle East reserved for someone and hell for the rest. No. And in order to resolve that problem, we must create synergies by settling down all the conflicts around it, all the way from Libya, Syria, Yemen, and so on. That's part of it. Concerning Israel and Palestine, their direct dialogue has no alternative. Having said that, I don't think the Secretary General should hide under the alibi, lets them talk and sort it out. No. The Secretary General must be in person there. We have the quartet, but that's not enough. Obviously not. And my experience tells me always a very simple logic. You delegate an issue as long as it works. The moment you realize it doesn't work, you must engage yourself, otherwise the water will continue flying out of the pipe, and you will say, well, my delegate hasn't arrived there and the water has gone out of the pipe. No. Sorry. This is why I said we need another mindset, another approach. And the artist role of the Secretary General, the artistic one, where he has to be the artist, is to engage member states into that exercise with a minimum of, let's say, not opposition, but opportunism. Opportunism is our main enemy, believe me. And we tend to be very often opportunists rather than creative and than frank. And this is, everybody has his own style. This is my style. I don't know whether they will like it or don't like it, but this is how I am, and with 67 years, I will definitely not change, including my sex, to become Secretary General. If they insist on a woman, I'm not going to be a woman. Sorry.
Let's take one last.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's take one last question, and then we'll let Dr. Kerim go.
Sir, I was listening. Evelyn Leopold, I was listening to you on Syria, and you said that the blockage in the Security Council, the divisions, were not responsible for a lot of the trouble in the Council because there had been resolutions that everyone agreed on. Now, isn't it the case that enforcing the resolutions with further actions has been a problem and showed divisions, for example, on barrel bombs, on the humanitarian aid?
Listen, divisions are sometimes a result of momentary situations, you know. Look at the United States and Russia now. The relations are all but not good and sound. But still, one cannot say that it's a dialogue among deaf people. They find ways and means to cooperate, and I gave this example of last December under US presidency, the Security Council concluded Russia was on board, Russia worked actively with and voted for it. The fact that Russia was not in the nuclear summit in Washington does not diminish the responsibility of Russia on nuclear arms. Everybody knows, is aware that the United States and Russia together are the ones who have to lead this game and to find ways and means how to decrease and to control. It's first of all about controlling, if there is access, God forbid, for the terrorists to come to nuclear arms, then we will not have to discuss, is it an American, a Russian, a Chinese, or I don't know, whatever affair. It will be our own affair, but it will be too late. And we should avoid that. This is why I'm always in favor, talk to each other, and mediate. This is the role of the Secretary General. And last but not least, when I was talking about the mindset, this organization existed for many decades based on the principle of zero-sum game. This is why we did not have a lot of solutions. They were postponed or not accepted, or we went in a disarray and drifted away from each other. We have to change the attitude. China, for instance, made a good move last year in talking about that on the Security Council and offering a new approach which is called win-win. And that's definitely a different approach than the zero-sum game one. And provided we are ready to function with this win-win approach, this organization definitely will be, politically speaking, more successful and more credible.